Hi, everyone. I'm Rahul Yates, founder and executive director of HumSub GlobalTEEN. And today I'm with Midwest Mixed Alissa Paris. And today we'll be having this is one of HumSub GlobalTEEN's first interviews, discussions, and we'll just be going over some different topics relating to the multiracial community. And yeah, so thank you all for joining us, and make sure to follow us on social media at HumSub GlobalTEEN and at Midwest Mixed. So, Alissa, would you like to just start off by introducing yourself and how you identify as, and we can go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. That changes a lot. I'm still figuring out how to identify and what words, resonate to describe myself, my being, my experience. But I identify as a Black mixed person, cisgendered woman. I'm queer. I live in the Midwest, Minneapolis, Minnesota, stolen lands of Anishinaabe and Dakota peoples. And I am a mother. I'm an entrepreneur, recently became an entrepreneur. I am the executive director of Midwest Mixed. I'm also a creative artist. I perform, I choreograph, and take the stage every few years when I feel inspired. Yeah, that's who I am. My background, to be more specific, I am Black. I have Indigenous and Puerto Rican heritage and German heritage as well. So that's a little bit about my mix.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, more of a personal question, what was your life growing up mixed, and did you have any specific experiences that you think would help illustrate this?
Mm, Yeah, so I grew up in a really eclectic neighborhood known as the West Bank, Cedar Riverside to some as well. It's kind of a meeting of two neighborhoods right outside of downtown Minneapolis. And so I think an experience would be like growing up in my neighborhood from the ages of 7 to 18. I lived in a neighborhood that was mixed in so many ways. Um, and I had a lot of friends from different ethnic groups and with different cultural traditions, and we were all different skin tones, and many languages spoken on my block and in my playground. And so I think that part of my upbringing was, I don't know, it was special to me in that I didn't have to work to fit because none of us did. Um, so I wasn't mixed, we all were in a way. Yeah.
And is there any experiences like from any time in your life that have stuck out and like was is related to being mixed, like somebody questioning your ethnicity or having you prove to them that you really are something?
Mm, mm. I mean, I've definitely had my fair share of experiences with folks just not getting it and wondering their curiosity, different motives for why they wanted to know, and that becoming clear. Maybe I was safe to like answer that question in an honest way. Um, there were a lot that were just exoticizing mixed children in my community. And so, seeing my mixedness as well, they were pointing out something real in some regards is that I have privilege. I have light skin privilege, and being racially or ethnically ambiguous does come with some privileges. It does afford you an opportunity to like speak to your nuance in some situations, but depending on the circumstances, you might not feel safe or welcome to do that. So it's really, yeah, I guess I don't have like a very specific experience that I want to unpack right now, but I will say that time and time again, I've been asked the "what are you" question, and my favorite responses to that question that I've come across, and that some of that I've used myself, would be, "You go first, put the other person in the hot seat, and then also, how much time do you have?" And that's like, how committed are you really to like understanding and unpacking this, because this is sensitive information, and there's so many layers to consider here. But I wouldn't respond that way in the same situation, the same folks, and it changes.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that being mixed as well. And so I think I'm sure you've seen this as well, but I know other multiracial people, and a lot of them who might be less racially ambiguous and look more like one race, they often just kind of choose to identify as that one race and kind of forget their mixedness or just kind of gloss over it when introducing themselves to people, or just even in general when like anything or a discussion about race or ethnicity comes up. So I guess, could you tell me about like how you've seen that play out, and if you have any advice or words of wisdom for multiracial people who may not be embracing their full selves, and yeah, do you have any like suggestions that you think would reasons that would help them like focus on increasing that sense of belonging? Because I think, as one of my topics of my independent study, I would really like to look into how to help multiracial people feel like all of themselves. And I know that even if as I was when I was younger, I would really just identify as an Indian because I felt like I didn't gain anything from my European white side. And now as I'm older, I identify as multiracial. But yeah, so I get that's there's the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Wow. I guess I wouldn't say necessarily advice, but just perspective or food for thought. I definitely think that due to so many different circumstances, of course, like colonization and the history of just racialized bodies historically throughout time, but specifically in the US, that single story has been pretty solidified that in the US, when we say mixed or multiracial or biracial, that equates to the Black-white binary experience. And unfortunately, mixedness is not new, but the language and the words that we're playing around with to talk about it are relatively new, and the meaning has changed over time. And so I think that that single story is something that Midwest Mixed, my org, that we work to disrupt. We don't want to strengthen or reinforce that binary, because we are erasing essentially Black and brown folks from the story, right? Like Blackness is not a monolith, and neither is any other ethnic or racial group. And so when we talk about mixedness and we equate it to just those who are mixed with white or just those who are mixed with Black and fill in the blank, we miss so many stories. And there's richness in that perspective and that experience, but it doesn't necessarily require the language. I think that you can be mixed and talk about your mixed experience without needing to call yourself a multiracial or biracial, or any of the other words that folks are coming up with. You still have a mixed story, and we all have a mixed story, right? Like it's a part of the collective story of how we all came to be here, and what we've discovered through interacting and engaging and building relationship with one another, but also through exploitation and white supremacy, and how we all are actively surviving that to this day. So it's just so much to consider, but I would say make your own language and take up space if you feel called to, and call out the anti-Blackness, because unfortunately, like, if you don't look a certain kind of mixed, you know, there's just so much there. And mixed people with skin privilege, or people with skin privilege in general, should be fighting to make sure that we are not lending to the further erasure of Black and brown voices and stories.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And
Yeah.
so I guess on a similar note, what would you think the mixed community could work on, or it needs to work on more, to get to like that next level of belonging um, and I guess just like as a community, where do you think that like there's areas that need to be strengthened? And then on the on the flip side, what do you think the mixed community does really well and that we should continue doing?
Oh, I like that. I like that question. How to start? Well, I will say that what we are doing well is learning out loud, taking risks. I see more mixed folks creating content and establishing their own platforms and spaces and programs to explore their lived experiences and their identity. And I see a lot of it being steered as like self-empowerment focused, right? So we have a right to develop language. We have a right, Dr. Maria P. Root created the Bill of Rights for people of multiracial heritage or mixed race ancestry. I think the language changed in time, that title changed, but in any case, that is the kind of tone and energy of particular generations. I think since the late 1960s and onward, we've seen a lot more of that kind of approach to understanding and interacting with mixedness. And I think that that's really powerful and it's special, and it does signal change and growth to me, but also old habits die hard. And so I will say on the flip side, to use your language, I think that something that mixed communities and mixed people could do better is, well, one, I already said, disrupt the single story, right? Create more inclusive spaces to explore these topics and themes, but also pause and just breathe and absorb and develop your analysis on race and race theory and the history of colonization globally, but also, you know, locally where you are and respected to where you live. But there's just so much to absorb. And I feel like in the rush to kind of feel grounded or feel self-actualized or feel belonging or affirmed, that sometimes we don't realize that we are also being complicit in bringing along those same tools and those same that we're just, it's white supremacy kind of remanifesting itself in a different way. And it doesn't always feel good to hear that we could be that to examine or observe that part of the oppressor that lives within us, to take something from Audre Lorde. But we have to do that. And to do that means pausing, slowing down, sitting still, sitting with the language, sitting with the perspectives. And the answer changes. So I don't think we have to be in such a rush to sort of claim or know or understand our mixedness. Getting it is an ongoing process, and there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely agree with that. So I think another topic that comes up with the mixed community is about code switching. So would you mind going through like what that is and kind of how it manifests in the different, in different ways in the mixed community?
Yeah. Well, code switching is something that everybody does. Well, in some ways, but just be specific with the mixed communities that I've interacted with, and there are mixed communities that I have not accessed. I've not interacted with many folks in Brazil. I have not interacted with the mixed folks of Australia or all these other parts of the world, more so now with this amazing little space being more of the norm now. But to say for the mixed communities that I've interacted with, I think that code switching, I think that it's not necessarily, I'm just going to say it's not unique to mixedness. It's Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian folks, all of us have interacted with language and know that when you talk a certain way, certain people listen. When you talk a certain way, you get certain opportunities, right? It's just, but also being able to like connect and like, and vibe with your folks, like that code switching is a survival strategy in some regards, but also a way of building community and connecting. And I think that definitely a common story that I've heard again and again is that mixed folks feel like they get called out for code switching because it signals that they're being inauthentic. And I don't think that that's necessarily always accurate, but it can be. And so I'll say, that mixed people, same as all other racialized groups and all other ethnic groups, and everybody needs to consider this next point, and that is that we have to recognize when we are appropriating a way of speaking. Lately, I've been hearing a lot of Black women say this specifically, and I've been saying it as well, like we have to be cautious when we're switching it up or talking a certain way just to be funny, to get some laughs, or to be aggressive or to like try to intimidate. Like if those are the only times that you're like relying on like African American vernacular, that's not right. Something's not right about that, and that says something about your analysis and how you feel about Black and brown people who speak that way. And that takes a lot of like work and like honesty and like reflection and like self-awareness. And it's not the most comfortable thing to like check yourself on, but I have definitely appropriated other folks' language and terms over the years as I was trying to like find myself as a mixed person with a very eclectic upbringing. And I think that code switching can be a really beautiful art form, and sometimes it can be a survival strategy, and then sometimes it can just be the way that we connect. But it's definitely something to like consider. I think you should track when you speak certain ways with certain folks and in certain situations, and just recognize when you can take a little bit of that back and say, no, I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to speak the way that I'm going to say this the way I actually feel right now. And then also checking yourself when you slip up, and maybe you step outside of, you're acting out of integrity in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I think we can transition a little bit to, why don't you tell us what Midwest Mixed is, how you started it, founded it, and I guess, yeah, what Midwest Mixed does and has done with the mixed community.
Yeah, so we're here in Minneapolis. We started in 2014. It started off in my living room, 2 hours once a month. My friend Owen Duckworth and I were like, we have a lot to say about mixedness. We both had friends who wanted to talk. We started unpacking, and it was called the Mixed Dialogues. It was gently facilitated community conversations. It was pretty intergenerational, folks of different combinations of ethnicities and cultural heritage and different races and skin tones and genders. And it was eclectic group of folks connecting to talk about things. And we just couldn't talk about it all in 2 hours. Like it just kept, everything was like, wait a minute, now there's 10 more thoughts and 10 more questions. Mm-hmm. And so we said, what can we do about that? So we decided to have a conference. And so in 2017, we hosted the first biennial Midwest Mixed Conference. The second one happened in 2019, and the third one is set to take place in June of 2020. And that'll be our first virtual conference. And so this is, Midwest Mix is still growing. We're still figuring it out. I am now the full-time director after running it in my spare time for 7 years. I am now focusing on this full-time and developing my leadership skills. But we have about 40 people now in kind donating their time. All of them are volunteers, and they run our dialogues team. The dialogues is still a thing. We're going to be expanding on that. We also have, like I said, the third biennial conference coming up, and we want that to be an incredibly accessible and intergenerational, dynamic, engaging, community-focused virtual 3-day conference. So we've got a lot of work to figure out how that's going to happen, but it's in full swing, and it's exciting to see it develop. And then we also have a youth action team that will be meeting actually for the first time this week. And so we are bringing together young leaders ages 14 to 21. It was 16 to 21, but a 14-year-old came in and we were like, oh, we gotta have her in there. So they will be working on building relationship and building community and learning the history that I just talked about earlier about mixedness globally and locally, the language, race theory in general, community organizing, but also doing all of this work that we do through an art-centered lens as well. So we're trying to bring artistic expression as a creative entry point into these conversations, because it is so much to hold and so much to like, there's so much to consider. And we think that art is a really great way to kind of break into more obscure or complex topics. So performance art, visual art is centered in all of our work. So yeah, that's Midwest Mixed right now, but I'll just say keep your eyes peeled. We are really trying to develop this work to be justice and to inspire change. And so what does that look like, and how are mixed people or people with mixed experiences, mixed families, interracial couples, transracially and transnationally adopted folks, when we say mixed, we're talking about all of those things. What does that look like to move towards change and influence change through this kind of exploration that we're doing in Midwest Mixed? So yeah, that's who we are.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I guess for someone who sees everything happening in the mixed community and wants to get involved, what do you think would be some, regarding Midwest Mix or just in general with the various multiracial organizations that exist across the country, how would you recommend somebody to get involved in the multiracial community, whether that's, and I don't know if there's like, and testing the comfort zone or et cetera, or just, I don't know, that I guess that's the question. Yeah.
There's so many different ways to get involved. I mean, the work that's being done across the United States, but even outside of the US, is incredibly accessible right now because of Zoom and all these virtual platforms, right? So I say study the time zones and then research what's happening out there and see what resonates, and also like tune in to what you're looking for, and what kind of support or community you might benefit from engaging in. There's the Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference that happens every other year. So that'll be next year, I believe, virtual, but possibly in Arizona, I want to say. That's an incredible space that's been around since the earlier 2000s, started in Chicago and now moves around. There's also Midwest Mixed is here for you. And of course, you can always hit us up. And if you're interested in learning how to start your own dialogue space, we can do consulting around that, just to share our best practices for how to get folks together. I will also say, like, protect your heart. Especially if you have white family, white partners or white friends, and you're opening up, or just anybody that you might be talking to about your mixedness who maybe doesn't understand why or wants to push back, protect your heart and your energy, and know that that is definitely indicator of trauma, that we all have trauma because of being racialized and because of white supremacy and colonization. We all are hurting from this. And so it's a tricky thing for everybody to navigate. And your truth is your truth, no matter who understands it. But yeah, I would say just do your research and see what's out there. Get on the phone with some of these folks, slide up in people's DMs. The mixed community that's creating content and programming right now is very accessible, which is exciting. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. And I think earlier this year when we were virtual and I had just more time to like think about getting involved with the mixed community, I hadn't really heard of many organizations or even just like Instagram accounts, social media groups, etc., that talked about mixedness. And then I might have like searched in one on like the Instagram search filter, and I pressed follow, and then in the recommendations there was another one, so I went on them, click follow, and then I just kept saying all of these different multiracial, multicultural, like focused like Instagram accounts, social media groups, etc. Even on Facebook, I've found so many. And I think that time when I just saw that, oh, it's there is a community there, because I always felt kind of alone because I just hadn't really seen a lot of that. But now I've seen like so many different kinds of like multiracial organizations, accounts that focus on so many different aspects of being mixed and from so many different places internationally, and like their different experiences. And yet we have different but similar experiences. And I think just seeing that community and seeing like how vast it really is, and it's continuing to grow, that was amazing feeling. And I really I thought that was just very eye-opening from my experience, just beginning to get involved with the mixed community.
Absolutely. I'll connect to that. I'll just chime in really quick and say,
Yeah.
like 10 years ago, or right before Midwest Mix was a thing, I was writing papers on mixedness and doing research, and I felt pretty isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not the case when I was Googling. There were maybe just a few things happening here and there, and it was harder to find folks to connect with about mixedness. And then, yeah, it blew up, and it's incredible. And I'll say to that as well, that not everybody agrees on what mixedness is. That conversation is very, there are so many different sides to how we talk about mixedness, how we hold it, what is important about it, what isn't important, how we center it. And yeah, I think that the diversity and opinions about that is I want to offer that we be excited about that, that we keep the conversation going, and that we stay open and receptive to these different opinions. But we also recognize what's not working for us, and we call attention to maybe the blind spots that we might have in some of our work and our intentions behind the work. But yeah, it's exciting. It's really exciting. I'm glad that you were able to connect and find folks right away, because it can be hard on your own trying to navigate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm really happy that we have such a wonderful community growing so fast. And I think just quick thing to add, I'm really excited to see I know it was delayed with the COVID, but the 2020 census, because that'll really show us from 2010 how much the mixed community has grown in 10 years. And I think it'll be really interesting.
Absolutely. I also really love that ethnicity is like that you can say, I can check the box that says I'm Black, I can check the box that says that I'm white, but then I can talk about what's behind that, right? I can talk about being Puerto Rican, I can talk about being Indigenous, and for those of us who understand or have ties to our lineage within the Black diaspora, like that, you can name those specific parts of yourself, and your heritage is so exciting, because like I said, we're all mixed in a way, and mixedness is not new, but like the language and the ways that we communicate about it, that we're still figuring that part out. So yeah, I'm excited to see what the census tells us this time around too. Also knowing that I was actually a census enumerator as a part-time job when I transitioned into taking this role as the full-time director of Midwest Mixed, and it is incredibly difficult to get everyone to fill out the census for so many reasons that I won't get into the weeds about right now. But unfortunately, Black and brown folks are severely underrepresented or undercounted in the census as well. And so yeah, I just want to name that as well. But I'm excited to see what comes out of the 2020 census.
Mm-hmm. And I think to conclude, how would you describe the mixed community? And you can use this, I guess, like 5 words or a phrase, or I don't know, a quote, anything to describe it.
Dang, you were so kind to send me the questions beforehand. And I remember that reading that final question and saying, ooh, I'm gonna have to think about that one. And I didn't. I think that I'm gonna pull a quote from Dr. Root's Bill of Rights. It's, not everything about Bill of Rights, or like the oath, the multiracial oath of responsibility, which is another beautiful document that she drafted. Both of those can be found on Midwest Mix Instagram right now. If you're on Insta, I think that I have questions, and there's ways that we can move those documents forward, improve upon them or expand upon them. But I would say that I have the right to develop a language to talk about my identity, and to change that over time, um, to choose how I identify and to change it over time, like that really means so much to me, that because we are evolving uh, beings, we are always expanding, that we see that freedom and the privilege and the power in choosing language and in choosing who we are, or who we think we are, but then being open to that growing and evolving. um, Mixes isn't new, but we're talking about it as if it is a new phenomenon right now, and it feels really important. There's a big significance to having this community to collaborate and connect with and build with. Um, but I think it's exciting because we have an opportunity to build real change and to move towards real change and to obliterate white supremacy and to really grow into, you know, I won't call it a post-racial society, but what move towards whatever is next when we get out of this yuck, and we get our heads right, and we build radical coalitions and try to build the next chapter. So yeah, I have a right to choose how I identify and to change that over my lifetime, and more than once, she said. That was not 5 words, but it was a quote. I
Great.
hope it makes sense. I
Thank
hope it makes sense. Thank you for asking that question, by the way.
Of course. Yeah.
The challenge. I needed a challenge.
Yeah. Um, well, I think that's it. But I'm just really glad that we were able to have such a meaningful discussion and go through the different aspects of being mixed and learning about how to get involved. And I wish you and Midwest Mixed luck, and I'll definitely see you again.
Absolutely. I look forward to watching what happens with HumSub GlobalTEEN.
Mhm.
And yeah, let's keep the conversation going. Let's do this again. There's so much to talk about.
Mhm.